When the sun's rising, he comes to dry up my bones. I will hide by the riverbed. When the fires are raging along grassy ways, I will run to the riverbed. As this river flows inside my soul, hides me away by its quiet shores, and I'll never thirst or fear the flame when I am by the river, when I am by the riverbank. When the toils of life have tired my soul, I will rest by the riverbank. When I have so much joy that I and my soul lies me away by its quiet shores. And I'll rise and shout with joy that I can't contain. When I am by the river, when I am by the river. This river flows inside my soul, lies me well by its quiet shores. And these roots are buried deep in this damp bench clay. I will rely on the riverbank when I am by the riverbank.
Good afternoon. Welcome to A Winter's Tale, the Art of Alchemy. It is a pleasure to be here together again, our 37th year, a proper tradition. You have come to hear, to listen as life unfolds itself anew through the words of these writers. We are lovers of the process, the magical process, alchemy of turning experiences into words. We love the transforming, shaping of words into permanent beauty. For our delight and edification, the twin aims of literature. No matter when the first transformation happened, it will happen now, in this present, as if newly formed. Experience made bold, a transforming of transience into permanence. The words retell our stories again and again. All the while, our present becomes past and our futures beckon in the mist. We are here to bear witness to multiple realities over time, all telling the same human story, the world becoming words. And so the magic begins. Somewhere between the late 8th and late 6th century BCE, the two long poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were written by the elusive Homer, the name evoking many myths. These stories of the Trojan War were deeply familiar long before in the oral tradition, and they have been retold through the centuries by many translators. The newest translator of both the Iliad and the Odyssey is Emily Wilson, who teaches classics and comparative literature at the University of Pennsylvania. An article in the New Yorker in September 2023 is entitled Mother Tongue, Emily Wilson Makes Homer Modern. A.E. Stallings, the poet and classicist, said, "It was time to strip away all the mannered layers, the tarnish of centuries, And she does that, keeping strictly to the line count. Her translations have the freshness of the sky after a storm. Wilson's goal, she said, was to evoke an experience of raw power and empathy, like the original, using the language of the people who will read it. She translates into iambic pentameter, echoing a centuries-long poetic tradition in English. Wilson says many diverse experiences, agony and triumph, killing and being killed, are forged into this singular story. We feel the thrill, the glory of successful slaughter, and we feel equally clearly how it feels to watch the darkness cover our eyes for the last time. Human mortality is the center of it all. In this selection, Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior, honorable Hector, meets his destiny before the walls of his beloved Troy, Priam's city.
Hello. From the Iliad by Homer. It's translated by Emily Wilson. I shall no longer run from you, Achilles, in fear, as I have done 3 times already, around the great and splendid town of Priam. I did not dare stand and wait for you, but now my spirit urges me to stand and face you. I may kill you or be killed. Let us invoke the gods. They are the best. As witnesses and guardians of contracts, I shall not mutilate you or disgrace you. If Zeus grants me the stamina to take your life away, Achilles, I will strip your famous armor, but I will give back your body to the Greeks. You do the same. Swift-footed Lord Achilles scowled at him and answered, Hector, do not speak to me of contracts. Fool, forget about agreements. Lions do not swear solemn oaths with humans, and wolves and lambs do not share common feelings. Their enmity endures forevermore. Just so, there's no way for you and me ever to love each other or be friends. And there can be no oaths between us two, till one man falls and slakes the thirst of Ares, the warrior, the god who bears the shield. Remember all your skill and all your courage. Now is the time for bravery and battle. Now you must be a warrior, a fighter. Now all your chances to escape are gone. Pallas Athena, through this spear of mine, will soon destroy you in a single instant. You will soon pay me back for all my pain, my grief for my companions, whom you killed when you were running riot with your spear. With this, he aimed his great long shadowed spear and hurled it. Glorious Hector stayed alert, eyes straight ahead, and saw the bronze spear coming, and ducked. The weapon flew above his head and was embedded in the earth. Athena grabbed it and gave it back to the great Achilles. Hector, the people's shepherd, did not notice. Then Hector spoke to marvelous Achilles. You missed, godlike Achilles. You knew nothing from Zeus about my destiny or death, although you thought you knew it all. You were just speechifying, fitting words together, and all this cleverness was meant to scare me, so I would lose my courage and my strength. I will not turn and run away from you. You will not fix your weapon in my back. Drive it straight through my chest as I attack you. If some god grants the victory to you, now try to get away from my bronze spear. I hope you offer it a gentle welcome and let its whole length rest inside your flesh. The war will lie more lightly on the Trojans. After your death, you were our greatest curse. With this, he aimed his great long shadowed spear and hurled it, and it did not miss. It struck the middle of Achilles' shield, then bounced and fell far back from it. And Hector, angry that his swift spear had left his hand in vain, stood there dispirited because he had no other ash wood spear. He raised his voice and called and shouted to Deiphobus, the warrior whose shield was white, and asked him for his long spear, but he was nowhere near. Then Hector understood inside his heart and said, "The gods have called me to my death. I thought Deiphobus was at my side, but he is on the wall. Athena tricked me. The horror of my death is near me now, not far away, and there is no way out. Zeus and the son of Zeus, the distant archer, must have decided this long ago. The gods who used to be so kind to me, who helped me in the past, and now my doom has come at last, but never let me die without a struggle and without a claim. Let me achieve some greatness and be known to people in the days to come." With this, he drew his sharp sword fastened at his hip, a big, strong blade, and gathered all his strength, and swooped, just like an eagle who soars high, then plummets through the dark clouds down to earth, to snatch a tender lamb or cowering hare. So Hector brandished his sharp sword and swooped. Achilles rushed towards him, spirit full of fearsome eagerness to kill. He held his finely fashioned shield to hide his chest and shook his head so that his shining helmet bobbed and its four horns swayed, and all around it, the fine gold horsehair plumes set by Hephaestus thickly along the crest were all a-quiver. Just as at dead of night among the stars, the evening star shines bright, most beautiful of all the constellations in the sky. So shone the bright point of Achilles' spear. He held his weapon in his right hand, hoping to strike the great Hector, and he scrutinized his handsome flesh to see which area was easiest to pierce. The fine bronze armor, taken when he had killed Patroclus, covered most of his body, but his skin was bare, just where the neck and shoulders are divided, the latches of the collarbone, the throat. There lies the fastest way to death. As Hector lunged forward, fine Achilles drove his spear right there. The point pierced through his supple neck, and yet the ashwood spear of heavy bronze did not cut through his windpipe. So he had the power to speak in answer to his killer. He fell down on the dust, and great Achilles gloated above him. "Hector, I suppose, after you killed Patroclus, you imagined that you were safe. You paid no heed to me because you knew that I was far away. Fool! I am still his helper and avenger, stronger than him by far. Although he left me beside the hollow ships, I am the one who caused your death and made your limbs unravel. The dogs and birds will mutilate and shame you. Patroclus will be buried by the Greeks with all due funeral honors." Faint and feeble, Hector, his helmet flashing bright, replied, "I beg you, by your life, your knees, your parents, do not let dogs devour me by your accept the bronze and gold, the lavish gifts my noble parents will provide you with, and give my body back. Let me go home, so that the Trojan men, the Trojan wives, grant me my due in death, a funeral pyre. Swift-footed Lord Achilles scowled and said, "Dog, do not beg or speak of knees or parents. If only I had will and heart to do it, I would carve up your flesh and eat it raw, for the abominations you have done me. No one can save your body from the dogs, not even if they bring me as a ransom 10 times or 20 times the usual rate, and weigh it out and promise me even more. Not even if Dardanian Priam promised to have you weighed and give your weight in gold. Not even so will your own mother ever lay you out properly upon a bier and mourn and grieve for you, the child she birthed. The dogs and birds will eat you up completely." Then Hector, in his flashing helmet, dying, answered, "I see you and I understand you. There is no way for me to change your mind. The heart inside your chest is made of iron. Be careful now. I may become the cause of wrath against you from the gods one day when Paris and Apollo will destroy you beside the Scaean gates, despite your strength." His death wrapped round him as he spoke. His spirit flew from his limbs to Hades, and she mourned his fate and left his manhood and his youth. Thank you.
The Poetry Foundation calls Jory Graham one of the most celebrated poets of the American post-war generation. She was born in 1950. Graham taught at the Iowa Writers Workshop and currently teaches at Harvard, where she holds the Boylston Professor of Rhetoric and Oratory, a position Seamus Heaney held before her. Graham was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1996. James Longenbach said of Graham, "She is a chronicler of bigness, the overawing bigness of our planet, but also the too bigness at times of the self." Calvin Bedian said, "Graham is never less than in dialogue with everything. She is the world champion at shot-putting the great questions." Weston Cutler said, "Graham tries so hard to get you to feel and understand in all complexity the issues she's tackling." Graham relies on line, short lines, long lines, broken lines, as a unit of sense and perception. She describes the line breaks as cliffs that the reader tumbles down again and again, over and over. She told Katie Wadman in the New Yorker interview in January of last year, "I am interested in accountability. Accountability to all the forces at play in the field that we call time, history, consciousness, heart." Frederick Douglass was the most prominent Black anti-slavery leader before the Civil War ended slavery. In many lectures, he illustrated the harms of slavery by describing his own life before his escape from slavery. He did the same in a series of autobiographies, the most detailed of which is My Bondage and My Freedom, published in 1855. Our selection takes place in 1834, when Douglas was hired out to Edward Covey, who was reputed to be a first-rate hand at breaking young slaves. My brother, an American historian, used My Bondage and My Freedom in each of his survey classes in American history, and he ranks it as the single best book to use in teaching slavery.
I Won't Live Long by Jory Graham. I won't live long enough to see any of the new dreams, the hundreds of new kinds of suffering, and weeds, birds, animals, shouldering their demise without possibility of regeneration. The heart in your tiny chest opening its new, unimaginable ways of opening. And to what might it still open? Will there still be such opening? Will you dare? I will not be there to surround you with the past, with my ways of knowing, to save you. Shall you be saved? From what? Home from fighting, are you? Remembering how he or she or they looked at you, while you both fed the machine or built the trough in dirt, where it will be necessary to plant again. Will it open? Will the earth open? Will the seeds that remain? Will you know to find them in time? Will those who have their lock on you let the openings, which are chance, unknowing, loneliness, the unrelenting arms of form, which knows not yet the form it will in the end be, open and form? Will there be islands? Will there be a day where you can afford to think back far enough to be the way we loved you? Words you said for the first time as we said them. Mystery, your grandfather said one day, after saying, shh, listen to the birds. And you sat so still, all your being arcing out to hear. And the bird in its hiding place gave us this future, this moment today when you can recall. Can you? His saying, there, that's a mystery. And you said the word as if it were new ground to stand on. You uttered it to stand on it. Mystery. Yes, mystery, he said. Yes, mystery, you said, talking to it now as it took its step out of the shadow, into the clearing, and there you saw it in the so-called invisible. Then when the wave broke the first time on what had seemed terra firma, and you knew as he held your hand, insisting you hold your ground, that there was foreclosure. There was oldness of a kind you couldn't fathom. And there was the terrifying suddenness of the now. Your mind felt for it. It felt the reach from an elsewhere and a dip which cannot hold. Splash went the wave. Your feet stood fast. Your hem was touched. We saw you watch. We felt your hand grip, but not to move back. Can you find that now, wherever you are, even a candle would be a gift, I know from there. Shh, he said so you could hear it. Pity, he said, not knowing to whom. Pity, you said, laughing. Pity, pity. And that was the day of your being carried out, in spite of your cold, wrapped tight to see the evening star. And he pointed, and you looked up, and you took a breath I hear even now as I go out. The inhalation of dark secrecy, fear, distance, the reach into an almost touching of silence, of the thing that has no neighbors and never will, in you, the center of which is noise. The outermost of freezing you can travel his arm to with your gaze till it's there. The real, a star. The earth is your home. No matter what they tell you now and what program you input via your chip or port, or faster yet, no, no, in that now I am not therein, to point, to take your now large hand and say, look through these fronds, hold your breath. The deer hiding from the hunter is right here in our field. It knows we are too. It does not fear us. Be still. Wait. And we will be left behind. Except just now. If you still once, that you might remember. Now. Remember now.
My Bondage, My Freedom by Frederick Douglass. I had been in my new home but for 3 days before Mr. Colby, my brother in the Methodist Church, gave me a bitter foretaste of what was in reserve for me. I presume he thought that since he had a single year in which to complete his work, the sooner he began, the better. Perhaps he thought that by coming to blows at once, we should mutually better understand our relations. But to whatever motive, direct or indirect, the cause may be referred, I had not been in his possession 3 whole days before he subjected me to the most brutal chastisement. Under his heavy blows, blood flowed freely, and wells were left on my back as large as my little finger. The sores on my back from his flogging continued for weeks, for they were kept open by the rough and coarse cloth which I wore for shirting. The occasion and details of this first chapter of my experience as a field hand must be told, that the reader may see how unreasonable as well as how cruel my new Master Colby was. The whole thing I found to be characteristic of the man, and I was probably treated no worse by him than scores of lads who had previously been committed to him for reasons similar to those which induced my master to place me with him. But here are the facts connected with the affair, precisely as they occurred. On one of the coldest days of the whole month of January 1834, I was ordered at daybreak to get a load of wood from forest about 2 miles from the house. In order to perform this work, Mr. Colby gave me a pair of unbroken oxen, for it seems his breaking abilities had not been turned in this direction. In due form, and with all proper ceremony, I was introduced to this huge yoke of unbroken oxen and carefully took which buck and which was Darby and which was in hand, and which was the offhand ox. The master of this important ceremony was no less than a person, Mr. Colby himself, and the introduction was the first of its kind I had ever had. My life hitherto had led me away from horned cattle, and I had no knowledge of the art of managing them. Mr. Colby took a rope about 10 feet long and one each stick and placed one end of it around the horns of the in-hand ox and gave the other end to me, telling me that if the oxen started to run away, as the scamp knew they would, I must hold on to the rope and stop them. I need not tell anyone who is acquainted with either the strength or the disposition of an untamed ox that this order was about as unreasonable as a command to shoulder as a mad bull. I had never driven oxen before, and I was as awkward as a driver as it can be possible to conceive. It did not answer for me to plead ignorance to Mr. Colby. There was something in this manner that quite forbade it. He was a man to whom a slave seldom felt any disposition to speak. Cold, distant more so, a face wearing all the marks of captious pride and malicious sternness. He repelled all advances. Colby was not a large man. He was only 5 feet 10 inches in height, I should think. Short neck, round shoulders, of quick and weary motion, of thin and wolfish visage, with a pair of small greenish gray eyes set well back under his forehead without dignity, and constantly in motion and floating his passions rather than his thoughts, in sight, but denying them in utterance of words. The creature presented an appearance altogether ferocious and sinister, disagreeable and forbidden, extreme. When he spoke, it was from the corner of his mouth and in sort of a light growl, like a dog when an attempt is made to take a bone from him. With his directions, I started for the woods. This distance from the house to the woods gate, a full mile I should think, was passed over with very little difficulty. For although the animals ran, I was fleet enough in the open field to keep pace with them. But on reaching the woods, I was speedily thrown into a distressing plight. The animals took fright and started off, carrying the cart full tilt against the trees, over the stumps, and dashing from side to side in a manner altogether frightful. As I held the rope, I expected every moment to be crushed between the cart and the huge trees. My oxen were finally brought to a stand by a tree, against which they dashed themselves with great violence, upsetting the cart and entangling themselves among sundry young saplings. By the shock, the body of the cart was flung in one direction and the wheels and tongue in another. There I was, all alone in a thick wood to which I was a stranger to. My cart upset and shattered, my oxen entangled, wild and enraged, and I a poor soul. But a green hand to set all this order right. After standing a few moments surveying the damage and disorder, and not without a presentiment that this trouble would draw after it others, even more distressing, I took one end of the cart body and, by an extra outlet of strength, I lifted it towards the axle tree from which it had been violently flung from. And after much pulling and straining, I succeeded in getting the body of the cart back in its place. This was an important step out of difficulty, and its performance increased my courage. The cart was provided with an axe, a tool which I had become pretty well acquainted with in the shipyard in Baltimore. With this, I cut down the saplings by which my oxen were entangled, and again pursued my journey with my heart in my mouth, lest the oxen should again take it into their senseless head to cut a crapper. My fears were groundless. Their spree was over for the present, and the rascals now moved on as soberly as though their behavior had been natural and exemplary. On reaching the part of the forest where I had begun the day before, chopping wood, I filled my cart with a heavy load as a security against another running away. I now saw in my situation several points of similarity with the oxen. They were property, so was I. They were broken, so was I. Covey was to break me, and I was to break them. Break and be broken. Such is life. Have the day already gone, and my face not yet homeward? It required only 2 days' experience and observation to teach me that such apparent waste of time would not be lightly overlooked by Covey. I therefore hurried towards home, but on reaching the lane gate, I met with the crowning disaster for the day. This gate was a fair specimen of Southern handicraft. There were 2 huge posts, 18 inches in diameter, rough-hewed and squared, and the heavy gate was so hung on one of these that it opened only about half the property distance. On arriving there, it was necessary for me to let go of the rope on the horns of the in-hand ox. And now, as soon as the gate was open, I let go of it. Off went my ox, making nothing of their load, full tilt. And in doing so, they caught the huge gate between the wheel and the cart body, literally crushing it to splinters, and coming only within a few inches of subjecting me to similar crushing. With these 2 hair-breadth escapes, I thought I could successfully explain the delay and avert punishment. I was not without a faint hope of being commended for the stern resolution which I had displayed in accomplishing the difficult task, a task which I afterwards learned even Mr. Covey himself would not have undertaken, without first driving the oxen for some time in an open field, preparing for their going into the woods. But in this I was disappointed. On coming to him, he assumed displeasure. And I was given him a history of the casualties of my trip. His wolfish face, his green eyes became furious, intensely furious. Go back to the woods again, he said. I hastily obeyed, but had not gone far on my way when I saw him coming right after me. My oxen now behaved themselves with singular propriety, opposing their present conduct to my representation of their former antics. I almost wished they would do something in keeping with the character they had given me before. But no, they had already had their spree, and they could afford now to be good oxen, extra good. On reaching the woods, my tormentor, who seemed all the way to be remarked upon the good behavior of his oxen, came up to me and ordered me to stop the cart. Covey paced off in his own weary fashion to a large black gum tree, the young shoots of which are generally used for ox goads. 3 of these goads he cut off. He trimmed up with his large jackknife. This done, he ordered me to take my clothes off. To this unreasonable order, I made no reply, but sternly refused to take my clothing off. After many threats, he rushed at me with something savage fierceness of a wolf, tore off the few and thinly worn clothes I had on, and proceeded to wear out my back. The heavy goads, which he had cut from the gum tree, were hurting. This flogging was the first of a series of floggings. While I was obeying his order to feed and get the horses ready for the field, Covey sneaked into the stables in his particular snake-like way, and seizing me suddenly by the leg, he brought me to the stable floor, giving my newly mended body a fearful jaw. I now forgot my roots and remembered my pledge to stand up in my own defense. The brute was endeavoring skillfully to get a slip knot on my legs before I could draw my feet up. As soon as I found what he was up to, I gave a sudden spring. He was defeated in his plan of tying me. He seemed to think that he had me very secure in his power. He little thought he didn't. He was in for what the rowdies say, a rough and tumble fight. Whence came the daring spirit necessary to grapple with a man who 8 and 40 hours before could with the slightest word have made me tremble like a leaf in a storm? I do not know. At any rate, I was resolved to fight. And I was actually hard at it. The fighting madness had come upon me, and I found my strong fingers firmly attached to the throat of my cowardly tormentor, as heedless of consequences at the moment, as though they stood as equals before the law. The very color of the man was forgotten. I felt as supple as a cat and was ready for the snakish creature at every turn. Every blow of his was parried, though I dealt no blows in return. I was strictly on defense, preventing him from injuring me, rather than trying to injure him. I flung him on the ground several times, when he meant to have hurled me there. I held him so firmly by the throat that his blood flowed through my nails. All was fair thus far, and the contest was about equal. My resistance was entirely unexpected, and Covey was taken all aback by it, for he trembled in every limb. "Are you going to resist, you scoundrel?" said he, to which I replied very politely, "Yes, sir," steadily gazing my interrogator in the eye to meet the first approach or drowning of a blow, which I expected my answer would call for. But the conflict did not remain thus equal. Covey soon cried out lustfully for help. Not that I was obtaining any marked advantage over him, or was injuring him at all, because he was gaining none over me, and was not able to single-handedly conquer me. He called for his cousin Hughes to come to his assistance, and now the scene had changed. I was compelled to give blows, as well as to parry them, and since I was in case to suffer for any resistance. I was still in defense towards Covey, but aggressive towards Hughes. And at this first approach of the latter, I dealt a blow in my depression which fairly sickened my youthful assailant. He went off, bending over in pain and manifesting no disposition to come within my reach again. Taken completely by surprise, Covey seemed to have lost his usual strength and coolness. He was frightened and stood puffing and blowing, seemingly unable to command words or blows. When he saw that poor Hughes was standing half bent with pain, his courage quite gone, the cowardly tyrant asked if I meant to persist in my resistance. I told him, "Yes, sir, I did mean to resist, come what might, that I had been treated by him like a brute for the last 6 months, and that I should take it no longer." With that, he gave me a shake and attempted to drag me towards the stick of the woods that was lying by the stable door. He meant to knock me down with it, but just as he leaned over to get the stick, I seized him with both hands by the collar. And with a vigorous and sudden snatch, I brought my assailant harmlessly, his full strength on the not over clean ground for which we were now in the cow yard. He had selected the place for us to fight, and it was but right that he should have all the advantages to himself. By this time, Bill, the hired man, was coming home on Monday morning to go to work. Covey and I had been skirmishing from daybreak, and we were still at it. He evidently was afraid to let me go. He probably would have obtained arms from the house to frighten me. Holding me, Covey called upon Bill for assistance. The scene here had something comic about it. Bill, who knew precisely what Covey wished to do, affected ignorance and pretended he had no clue what to do. "What shall I do, Mr. Covey?" said Bill. "Take hold of him. Take hold of him," said Covey. With a toss of his head peculiar to Bill, he said, "Indeed, Mr. Covey, I want to go to work. This is your work." "This is your work," said Covey. "Take hold of him." Bill replied with spirit, "My master hired me to work, not to help you whip Frederick." And Bill walked right off, leaving Covey and myself to settle our matters as best we might. But my present advantage was threatened when I saw Caroline, the slave woman of Covey, coming to the cow yard to milk. For she was a powerful woman and could have mastered me very easily, exhausted as I was now for sure. As soon as she came into the yard, Covey attempted to rally her to his aid. Fortunately, Caroline was in no humor to take a hand in any such sport. We were all in open rebellion that morning. Caroline answered the command of her master, "Take hold of me," precisely as Bill had answered, but in her, she said no. It was at greater peril to so answer, so she was a slave of Covey, and he could have done with her as he pleased. It was not so with Bill, and Bill knew it. Samuel Harris, to whom Bill belonged, did not allow his slaves to be beaten, unless they were guilty of some such crime which the law would be punished. But poor Caroline, like myself, was at the mercy of the merciless Covey. Nor did she escape the dire effects of her own refusal. He gave her several sharp blows. Covey at length gave up his contest, letting me go. He said, puffing and blowing at great rate, "Now you scoundrel, you go to work. I would not have whipped you half so much if you had not resisted." The fact was, he had not whipped me at all. I had drawn blood from him, and even without his satisfaction, I should have been victorious, because my aim had not been to injure him, but only to prevent injuring me. During the whole 6 months that I lived with Covey, after this transaction, he never laid a hand on me with anger. He would occasionally say he did not want to get a hold of me again, a declaration which I had no difficulty in believing. And I had a secret fleeing, which answered, "You need not wish to get a hold of me?" Well, my dear reader, this battle with Mr. Covey, undignified as it was, and as I fear my narration of it is, was a turning point in my life as a slave. It rekindled in my breast the smothering embers of liberty. It brought up my Baltimore dreams and revived a sense of my own manhood. I was changed being after that fight. I was nothing before. I am a man now. It recalled to life my crushed self-respect and my self-confidence and inspired me with new determination. I am a free man.
I wish there was some place I can hide from my fear. But my empathy will die. Where will she go? Could she someday rise? My father and I see darkness in the other's eyes. We love the truth, hate the worldly lies. fighting for good. We stand on different sides. But what can you do when you're fighting the dark with a candlelight? And what can I learn when my tongue is afire and my ears are too full of my pride? And I feel like I am becoming desensitized. And so too is my father on the other side. My tongue is raw from self-inflicted bites. Family reunions make me long for the goodbyes that I can drive and injure the shadows with my headlights. And it's not that I don't love them, and it's not that they don't care. It's the way they see the world as if everything is fair. It's the danger they don't see within the words they say. Put in a number for a name, or an us for a they. Here I am. Here I am. A human. Fire and my ears are too full of my pride, and I feel like I am becoming desensitized. And so too is my father on the other side. And so too is my father on the other side.
Patrick Bringley comes to the Metropolitan Museum of Art the first time at 11 years old. He said, the magical part was that as we drew near it, it kept growing wider and wider. He immediately understood it as a place of impossible breadth. Several years later, Bringley moves to New York for college, takes courses in art history, again climbing the grand staircase as a starry-eyed, ambitious student with big artistic dreams. What changes his moving up ideas is that 2 years after college, when he was working as a staffer at the New Yorker, his big brother Tom dies of cancer 2.5 heavy years after diagnosis. Bringley quits his job at the New Yorker and applies for a position as a guard at the Met, a position he keeps for 10 years. He said he had no thoughts of moving forward. My heart was full, my heart was broken, and I badly wanted to stand still a while. After a time, Bringley finds his voice describing artworks and their creators, and defines community with the museum guards. All the beauty in the world is about an astounding place and the power of art. Joe Polanski has been named National Sports Writer of the Year by 5 different organizations. That's what the book cover said. It didn't say what organizations, but of course that's important. So I'll read it again. Joe Poznansky has been named National Sports Writer of the Year by 5 different organizations. He says of his latest book, 2023, "This is the book I always hoped would be on the shelf. This is a book of forever moments, counting down the 50 most magical baseball moments." Poznansky admits that the ranking is a bit untidy, but all are magical and moments that have made people fall in love with baseball.
All the Beauty in the World by Patrick Bringley. The next exhibition sneaks up on me. Whereas Michelangelo's arrival at the Met was heralded by banners along Fifth Avenue, I haven't so much as heard the words "G's Bend" until I am posted in a small exhibition in the Modern and Contemporary Art Wing. 10 quilts hang on the walls of 2 spacious galleries. 10 quilts by 8 quilt makers, 4 of whom share the same common surname, Petway. "What is this?" I whisper under my breath, feeling my pulse quicken as I walk from one disorienting piece to the next. Boldly contrasting colors, asymmetrical patterns, rough and worn materials joined by visible stitches. This is all I can make of the quilts on my first day working the show, but my heart rate tells me they are beautiful. Over the next few weeks, I learned everything I can about these quilt makers. I read interviews with dozens of women who quilted in G's Bend, Alabama, and spoke about their work and lives. Hard crops up so often in the interviews, it is like a refrain. We come up hard, time was hard, Lord, we did work hard. Lucy T. Petway is one of the artists in the show. As a child, she attended school from late November until late March, at which time she was needed to knock cotton stalks, cut bushes, clear up new ground, get ready to break the land and plant. Like virtually all the women, her people were tenant farmers. But Lucy also brought other work to the fields. Each day, she carried a handful of quilt pieces to stitch together during her meal break. She hoped to finish a block or so. Her quilt from 1955 depicts G's Bend. On one side, a blue stripe represents the Alabama River. On the other side, cotton fields are rendered with patterned calico. The rest consist of blocks of concentric squares. Here we are looking at literal housetops, a bird's eye view of 1 large and 4 small homes. If we could zoom out even farther, we'd see the river make a dramatic horseshoe-shaped turn, isolating the bend on 3 sides from the wider world. If we could draw in closer and have a look at the homes Petway depicted, we'd have a clearer sense of the area's history. The biggest is the big house of the old Petway plantation, and the 4 smaller are slave quarters. The first Petway to arrive in the region was Mark H. Petway, who in 1845 purchased a cotton plantation from the heirs of Joseph G. With it, he received 47 human beings as property. The quilt-making Petways descend from slaves who were given the Petway surname. Quilting was an unusually public art. When the spring came, women had to sun out the quilts, put them on the line. Lucy T. would sometimes sun out 15, sometimes 20. And people be passing by and sometimes they'd go in the ditch watching quilts. In her younger years, she quilt watched on foot, strolling through the neighborhood with pencil and paper and copying the works of masters. Draw a pattern from it, make me my quilt. The earliest quilt in the show is one she might have sketched. Mary Elizabeth Kennedy would have hung it out in the sun in the mid-1930s. It is made of many shades of white, pale blue, and blue-green. I didn't know white could have shades, but she's achieved it by using salvaged fabrics, perhaps strips of old clothes that are sun-bleached and field-worn. These are the colors of real life, not of fine art supplies. The underlying structure is wholly obscured by patterns that break out of their blocks and race around the quilt with great energy. There's a kind of pixelated lightning bolt buzzing amid the blue. It looks wild, bold, daring, hanging in the Met's contemporary art wing. I can only imagine how it looked covering one of her children in a drafty log cabin. The 1930s were lean years in G's Bend. When cotton prices crashed during the Depression, few vendors could afford to pay their white absentee landlords. Debt collectors executed a coordinated raid, seizing farm equipment, livestock, household goods, sending people into the woods to scavenge for food and fuel. In the midst of all that, Kennedy quilted this. It looks to me like the very definition of art, something more beautiful than it has any right to be. My favorite artist in the show is Loretta Petway, the only quilt maker represented by multiple works. She grew up at a time when so-called Roosevelt houses dotted the Bend, fruits of a New Deal effort to aid a plundered community. Given access to credit and a chance to buy homes, Benders didn't migrate to cities at the rate of other Black Southerners. I never had a child life, she told an interviewer. The biggest shock is learning that she didn't like to sew. She had a raggedy old house, and her children slept on corn shuck mattresses that were intolerable without quilts. Many women quilted in groups, chatting and singing church songs as they worked. But Loretta labored in solitude. She struggled with depression and insomnia, and by her own account, didn't have friends. I ain't had no other choice because I asked people for quilts and they wouldn't give me none. So I said, I'm gonna make these the best I know how and quilt them. Think they'll keep me and my kids warm, and they did. It's a Sunday morning. I'm standing in front of the most beautiful quilt I've ever seen and thinking about its maker. The quilt I love dates from 1965, the same year Martin Luther King spoke at Pleasant Grove in the midst of a hard-fought, high-stakes voting rights drive. I could decide to look at the artwork as if it were an abstract painting. It is as spare and striking as any modernist picture. But I won't do that. It's a quilt, and I adore it for a patchwork of reasons. Its history, practicality, beauty, texture. I get as close as I can to the work. It billows lightly, casting a shadow on the wall. I picture Loretta assembling her fabrics, in her words, old shirts and dress tails and breeches legs, whatever wasn't worn out like the back of pants legs. Backing up a few strides, I take in a quilt composed of vertical bars or stripes, almost imperceptibly wavy. The right, and left edges are dark blue denim. Most bars are lavender, and then there are 2 bars made up of white fabric placed near together. The work is called Lazy Gal Bars. I run my eyes horizontally across them, and I imagine I'm pressing piano keys. Then I let my eyes float slowly, lazily down the long bars, and I can't find the words that would make it sound reasonable, but I am astonished by them. The lighter pair of stripes are like light beam-shaped angels, joyfully unbent. I am moved by the quilt's geometry and also by its imperfections, the slightly wandering lines, the swift, unfussy stitching, the improvised materials. It has an abundance of art's most heartening qualities, including diligence and inspiration. I think to myself, there is a lesson here, and it's a funny one to be learning in a place as grandly cosmopolitan as the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Meaning is always created locally. The greatest art is produced by people hemmed in by circumstances, making patchwork efforts to create something beautiful, useful, true. Michelangelo's Florence, even Michelangelo's Rome, was in this way rather like Loretta Petway's G's Bend. I'll try not to think anymore in terms of high Renaissance. I'll think of a person spreading out a bit of fresh plaster and painting it, and a little bit more, and painting it.
I notice there's about 3 bottles of water under here, so if I grab the wrong one on the way out, I guess that's just how it is. Nolan and the Table Leg, July 15th, 1973, Detroit, by Joe Panoski. Nolan Ryan is one of the most unhittable pitcher in modern baseball history. Nolan Ryan also lost more games than any pitcher in modern baseball history. Tell me, how can one explain that? Yes, he pitched a lot of games. But I think the only way to explain it is to say that Ryan was locked in an eternal baseball battle with himself. He struck out more batters than anyone. He walked more batters than anyone. He threw more no-hitters than anyone. He threw more wild pitches than anyone. He achieved the lowest batting average. He made more fielding errors than anyone. See, Nolan Ryan's baseball life was a magnificent clash between light and darkness, control and wildness, strikeouts and walks, dominance and self-destruction. All his career He had an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And it was never entirely clear which would emerge triumphant. Nobody could hit him, but they didn't necessarily have to win. Here's what I mean. Ryan walked 6 or more batters in a game 135 times, far and away the most in baseball history. Ryan allowed 3 or more stolen bases in a game 77 times. Again, most in baseball history. Ryan made an error in 79 of his starts, the most of any modern pitcher. Nolan Ryan did more fabled things than anyone else. He threw 7 no-hitters, one of them when he was 43 years old. He broke Sandy Koufax's single-season strikeout record. He threw 235 pitches in a single game against the Red Sox. And afterwards, he just shrugged. Hell, he said, I threw 242 pitches in a game in Detroit just last year. He repeatedly and ferociously punched a batter named Robin Ventura, who had dared to charge the mound against him. He threw the pitch that the Guinness Book of World Records recorded as the fastest ever thrown, 100.9 miles per hour, which may not sound all that amazing. But physicists interviewed for the documentary Fastball estimated that it was actually traveling at 108 miles per hour. I think Ryan simply had a different goal from other pitchers. They wanted to win games. He wanted to do the unforgettable. They wanted to get batters out. He wanted to make batters throw down their bats and yield. And that's why I think the closest Nolan Ryan ever got to his ultimate goal was on a July Sunday afternoon in Detroit. It was Cap Day in 1973, and more than 41,000 Detroit fans were in attendance. That was a big year for Ryan. He had thrown his first no-hitter 2 months before. It was the year that he would break Koufax's strikeout record. And yet he felt off balance coming into the game. He had been pitching poorly. His control was poor. He needed a big performance. So he went into the Detroit game trying to throw a no-hitter. That's usually the worst way for a pitcher to think. You don't try to throw a no-hitter. You do your best, and if the stars align, it happens. But Ryan was built differently, and there was always seemed to be a small part of his mind thinking no-hitter. His first pitch of the game was a curveball to Detroit's Jim Northrup. Ron Luciano was umpiring behind the plate, and he would say that it broke down as if it had fallen off the edge of a cliff. Uh-oh, I thought. If that's his curveball, we're in trouble tonight. By we, he meant the Tigers. And they were in trouble. They were swinging at shadows. Ryan had 16 strikeouts through 7 innings and had not allowed a single hit. Ryan rarely was impressed with himself. Often he said he was just trying to do his job. But even he couldn't help notice how much his curveball was breaking that day. That's the best curveball I've ever had, he would say after the game. Only then did the Angels offense had a very long inning. They got 4 hits and drew 3 walks. The Tigers used 3 different pitchers. The innings lasted almost an hour. And Ryan's arm stiffened up. It felt dead, the way it normally felt a few hours after a start. I was quite concerned, Ryan would admit. Of course, he stayed in the game, but when he went back to it, he found that his fastball lacked the pop and his curveball no longer was dropping. He bluffed his way through the bottom of the 8th inning without allowing a hit. But by the time he got back to the dugout, his arm was just throbbing. Sometimes to be a great pitcher, he would say years later, you also have to be a great actor. You got to make the batter think that they've got no shot. And that's what he tried to do in the 9th. His stuff was gone. But damn it, he was still Nolan Ryan. He got Mickey Stanley to ground out. Gates Brown then hit a line drive rocket, a sure single if he had not hit directly at Angels rookie shortstop. And that brought Norm Cash to the plate. Norm Cash was coming to the end of a colorful and fantastic career. He was a Texas farm boy who had married his high school sweetheart, was drafted by the Chicago Bears to play professional football, and chose baseball instead. He hit 377 home runs over his career, more than Joe DiMaggio, Gil Hodges, or Yogi Berra. He was outgoing and fun-loving and wacky. Cash stepped up to the plate with 2 outs in the 9th, and even though Cash was 39 years old, he was still dangerous. Ryan didn't know if he had enough to finish him off. Only then Ryan noticed something. Cash didn't have a bat in his hand when he came to the plate. No, he had a table leg. You can't hit with that, the umpire barked. Ron, Cash said, I can't hit him no matter what I use. Then Ryan knew he was getting his no-hitter. Cash threw away the table leg, got a bat, and dutifully popped up to shortstop to complete the no-hitter. After the game, everybody bowed to the pure awesomeness that was Nolan Ryan. He had to love it. Either that fastball or that curveball should be outlawed, Luciano said. Nobody should have both of those. He struck me out 3 times, Hall of Famer Frank Robinson said. And I wasn't even playing. Jackie and Yogi, September 28th, 1955, Bronx, by Joe Posnowski. We were walking around the Yogi Berra Museum in Lake Little Falls, New Jersey, Yogi Berra and me, and he was telling me about his awe-inspiring movie magic, Too Incredible to Believe life. He was at Normandy on D-Day. He played for 10 World Series champions. He proposed to his first love, and they were married for 65 years. He may have been telling a story about Joe DiMaggio or Mickey Mantle or one of the U.S. presidents when he met or when he walked by a when he walked by a photograph. Out! He shouted suddenly. And then Yogi picked his story back up like nothing had ever happened. The photograph was of his applying the tag as Jackie Robinson stole home in Game 1 of the 1955 World Series. Though it remained among the most indelible moments in baseball history, the steal itself didn't mean very much. The Dodgers were trailing the Yankees by 2 when Robinson found himself on third base with 2 outs. His daring steal of home did cut the margin to 1, but the Yankees won the game. Still, it was the most famous steal of baseball history. And I think there are 3 reasons. 1, the players involved are renowned. It was Jackie Robinson and Yogi Berra. And the Yankee pitcher was Whitey Ford, chairman of the board, another Hall of Famer. 2, this was the Yankees and Dodgers, a rivalry unlike any other. Between 1949 and 1956, the Yankees and the Dodgers would play each other in the World Series 5 times. Up to 1955, the Yankees won every time, and the Dodgers were desperate and hungry. Robinson's dash was a battle cry. This team, Roger Kahn would write of those Dodgers and the Boys of Summer, was awesomely good and yet defeated. Their skills lifted every man's spirit, and their defeat joined with every man's existence. A national team with a country in thrall, irresistible and yet unable to beat the Yankees. But it is the 3rd reason that I think best explains why the play is timeless. We don't know if Robinson was safe or out. Oh, you might think that you don't. Lots of people think that they know. Robinson was on third, a nice size lead, and he was watching Ford closely. He then took small hops and took off for the plate while Ford was in his windup. Ford's pitch best beat him there. Yogi caught it with his left foot on home plate. He reached down with both his glove and his right hand and tried to tag Robinson's right foot just before it touched home. Out, safe. Home plate umpire Bill Summers did not hesitate. He ruled safe. Berra was sure that he had blown the call. So sure that he stood up and tore off his mask and began screaming at Summers like he had never had an umpire and never would again. Summers just kept stretching his arms again and again, a repeat of a safe call, and then turned his back on Berra. And people have been arguing ever since. There is one surviving play of the one surviving film of the play. This replay shows everything and nothing at all. You will see it exactly if you want. If you want to see Robinson out, he's out. If you want to see him safe, he's safe. It was Bush stuff, Berra shouted to reporters after the game. It was showboat strategy, stealing home when you're 2 runs behind that. It was a bad play. Reporters raced over to Robinson for a response. The only thing Bush about it, Robinson replied, was Bera's tag. Reporters raced back to Bera for his response to the response. He was out, Bera said. The call was blown. It was the wrong play, and he was out. Back to Robinson. Tell him to worry about himself, Robinson said. He didn't tag me until after I was crossed. Back and forth, the Yankees, as you know, won the game. But the Dodgers end up winning the World Series. They finally beat the Yankees, and Jackie Robinson's stolen base became a symbol of that victory. What I did not know on that day, we walked around the museum, was that Yogi Berra yelled, "Out!" at that photograph in the museum every time. His family said he never missed, not even once. But there's even a better story. Jackie Robinson died in 1972. And for the next 40 years, Yogi Berra would often find himself at a banquet or a celebration or gathering with Jackie's widow, Rachel Robinson. They always greeted each other the same way. Safe, Rachel would say. Out, Yogi would say. And then the two would laugh and hug.
It's come to this time. Each year, Renelle Thompson and her staff prepare this beautiful space for our gathering. They make us comfortable. They prepare the manuscripts for the readers, design the program, bring in the stage, set up the chairs, and plan the reception. Thank you, Renelle, for creating this event and for flawlessly hosting us for 37 years. Thank you, each member of the library staff, for your part in this event and for making this place friendly for students and guests every day. Thank you, Lisa, Craig, Krista, Anna, Kelsey, Kelly, Becky, Justin, Ginger, Alicia. We are most grateful for our sound system. Thank you, Randy Preston. Maddie, thank you for bringing yourself and your beautiful music to A Winter's Tale. Readers, what a privilege to have you this year. And to our audience, those we see and those whose presence is felt, we give our deep appreciation. Please stay for the reception. A different angle, Fly Fishing Stories by Women, was published in 1995. Of course, it contains fish story upon fish story. I read them all with fascination. And I have fished one time in my life when I was 12 years old. These women's stories appeared in Sports Afield, New York Times, Ocean Fantasy, Trout, Fly, Rod, and Reel. One writer had written a fly casting column for years and run a well-known fly fishing school in New York. The editor, Holly Morris, writes that these women have joined fly fishing's public meditation. They have claimed their stretch of the river, and they have contributed to a grand and magical literary tradition. Wisława Szymborska. Well known in her native Poland, she came to be known internationally when she won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature in 1996. She was born in 1923. She lived most of her life in Krakow, lived through World War II and Stalinism. She knew evil, cruelty, and terror. She explores intelligently and sympathetically philosophical, moral, and ethical issues. Her poems are known for their precise, concrete language, her wit, and her deceptive simplicity.
The Company of Men by Pam Houston. I can't remember the last time I envied a man, or in fact, if I ever have. I have loved men, hated them, befriended them, taken care of them, and all too often compromised my sense of self for them. But I don't think I have ever looked at a man and actually coveted something his maleness gave him. And yet envy was at least one of the surprising things I felt last spring, when I found myself standing armpit deep in a freshwater stream at 2 a.m. near Interlochen, Michigan, fly casting for steelhead with a bunch of male poets. When a man named Jack Driscoll first calls and invites me to Interlochen, he tells me about the Academy, a place where talented high school students are given a lot of time to develop their art. Although he makes it clear that I will be expected to read from my fiction and talk to the students about craft, every other time we speak on the phone, all he really wants to talk about is fishing. For all the time I spend outdoors, I'm not much of a fisherman. And fly fishing, like all religions, is something I respect, but don't particularly understand. If Jack bothers to ask me if I want to go fishing, I will say yes. I've always said yes. And as a result, the shape of my life has been a long series of man-inspired adventures. And I have gone tripping along behind those men, full of strength and will and only a half-baked kind of confidence. My goal not being to excel, but to simply keep up with them, to not become a problem, to be a good sport. It is a childhood thing. I was my father's only son, and I laugh at all the places his particular insecurity has taken me. Sheep hunting in Alaska, helicopter skiing in Montana, cliff diving in the Bahamas, ice climbing in the Yukon Territory. Mostly, I have outgrown the need to impress men in this fashion. In the adventures I take these days, I make the rules. But as my trip to Michigan draws nearer, I feel a familiar and demented excitement to be back at the mercy of a bunch of lunatic outdoorsmen, a stubborn novice with something intangible to prove. I fly up to Traverse City on what the woman at the United Express counter calls the big plane, a twin engine that bumps between thunderstorms and patches of dense fog, before skidding to a stop on a bleak and rainy runway surrounded by leafless April woods. I am greeted by what looks like a small committee of fit and weathered middle-aged men. Their names are Jack Driscoll, Mike Delp, Nick Bozanek, and Doug Stanton. Their books are titled after the landscape that dominates their lives. Collections of poetry called Under the Influence of Water, The Long Drive Home, and Over the Graves of Horses, and Jack's award-winning collection of stories titled Wanting Only to Be Heard. They fight over my luggage, hand me snacks and sodas and beers, and all but carry me to the car on the wave of their enthusiasm. Weather's been good, Mike says, by way of a greeting. The lake ice is breaking. It's a real late run for the steelhead, Doug says. You're just in time. Any minute now, Jack says, his mind full of the long, dark bodies of fish in the river. And then, we've got a reading in 45 minutes, then a dinner that should be over by 10. The president of the local community college wants to meet you. At midnight, we fish. By 12:25 a.m., I am dressed in my long underwear, Jack's camouflage sweat clothes, Mike's neoprene liners, Doug's waders, and Nick's hat. I look like the Michelin tire man. The wader's so big and stiff, I can barely put one foot in front of the other. We pile into Mike's Montero, rods and reels jangling in the back. Jack and Mike and Doug and I. Nick, each man has told me, privately in a quiet, apprehensive voice, is recovering from bursitis and a divorce. And for the one or the other of these reasons, he will not fish this year. No one asks me if I'm tired, nor do I ask them. These men have had 9 months of winter to catch up on their sleep. Cabin fever reflecting in their eyes like exclamations. The steelhead will start running soon, maybe tonight, and there's no question about where they should be. It takes almost an hour to get to the river, with what I quickly understand is an obligatory stop at the Sunoco in the tiny town called Honor for day-old donuts and Coca-Cola and banter with the cashier. Along the way, we listen to what Mike and Jack say is their latest road tape. 3 Greg Brown songs recorded over and over to fill a 90-minute drive. The rotating sign on the Honor State Bank says 1:15 a.m. and 22 degrees. The men have bet on what the temperature will be. They have also bet on how many cars we will pass on the 2-lane highway, how many deer we will see in the woods between Mike's house and the bridge, if it will snow or rain, and if so, how hard. Doug wins the temperature bet, closest without going over at 21 degrees. The betting is all part of a long conversational rap among them, a rap that moves from Mike's last fish to Jack's latest fiction, to concern for Nick and his lost house, to the girl at the Sunoco, to an in unison sing-along to their favorite Greg Brown lyrics. The whole conversation is less like speaking, really, and more like singing, a song they've spent years and years of these cold spring nights together learning. Nights anybody, anywhere else in the world would call winter, nights filled with an expectation that can only be called boyish and shadowed by too much of the grown-up knowledge that can ultimately defeat men. Sometimes they remember I am there. Sometimes they forget I'm a woman. I feel in these moments like I've gone undercover, like I've been granted security clearance to a rare and private work of art. And though I have always believed that women bond faster, tighter, deeper than men could ever dream of, there is something simple and pure between these men. A connection so thick and dense and timeless that I'm fascinated and jealous and humbled all at the same time. Shit, Jack says, look at them all. We have finally come out of the woods into a bridge no longer than the width of the 2-lane roadway. As impossible as it is for me to believe, at 2 a.m., the gravel areas on both sides of the bridge are lined with pickups. A counterculture of night stalkers, 2 and 3 trucks deep. We'll go downstream, Jack says, after some consideration. Nobody's going to do any good here. We drive downriver while Mike points out all the sights as if we can see them. A place called the Toilet Hole, where Doug and Nick got lucky. The place Mike got his car stuck so bad 4-wheel drive couldn't help him. The place Jack caught last year's biggest fish. We drop Doug off at his favorite hole near the mouth of the river, drive back upstream a few hundred yards, park the Montero, and step out into the night. It's a little bit of a walk from here, Mike says, and the mud's pretty deep. 2 steps away from the truck, and already I feel the suction. The mud we are walking in ranges from mid-calf to mid-thigh deep. I'm following Jack like a puppy, trying to walk where he walks, step where he steps. I get warm with the effort and a little careless, and suddenly there's nothing beneath me, and I'm in watery mud up to my waist. Mike and Jack, each on one arm, pull me out of the hole so fast it seems like part of the choreography. Let's try to cross the river, says Jack. And before I can even brace for the cold, we are in it. Thigh, hip, waist deep. And I feel the rush of the current tug me toward Lake Michigan. 1 foot in front of the other, Jack says. The hole's right in front of you. When you're ready, go ahead and cast. I lift the rod uneasily into the night, close my eyes, and try to remember how they did it and a river runs through it. And then bring it down too fast and too hard with an ungraceful splat. Let out a little more line, Jack says, so gently as if he's talking to himself. A few more splats, a little more line, and I'm making casts that aren't embarrassing. Jack moves without speaking to help Mike with a snarl in his line. "This is your night, Del," Jack says, his shadowy form floating away from me, a dark and legless ghost. "What in the world are you doing here?" A voice giggles up from inside me, and the answers sweep past me, too fast to catch. "Because I can't turn down a challenge. Because my father wanted a boy. Because touching this wildness is the best way I know to undermine sadness. Because of the thin, shimmery line I am seeing between the dark river and the even darker sky." Soon I stop thinking about being washed to Lake Michigan. I marvel at how warm I am in the waders. So warm and buoyant that I forget myself from time to time and dip some unprotected part of me into the icy water. A deer crackles sticks in the forest across the river. An angry beaver slaps his tail. In whispers, we take turns identifying planets and constellations and murmur at the infrequent but lovely falling stars. When we are quiet, I can hear a faint crashing, constant, reverberant, sounding in the dark for all the world like the heartbeat of the earth. "Lake Michigan coming over the breakwater," Jack says to my unasked question. "There must be a big wind on the other side." My fishing is steadily improving. Every 5th or 7th cast hangs a long time in the air and falls lightly, almost without sound. "You know," Jack says, "there aren't too many people who could come out here like this and not hook themselves, or me, or the shoreline. Isn't that right, Delp?" Mike murmurs in agreement, and my head swells with ridiculously disproportionate pride. The constellations disappear, and the light snow begins falling. "God, I love the weather," Mike says, his voice a mixture of sarcasm and sincerity, and for a while there is only the whisper of the line and the flies. "Fish!" Jack shouts suddenly. "Fish on the line!" I am startled almost out of my footing, as if I've forgotten what we've come for, as if the silence and the night and the rhythm of the flies hitting the water have become reason enough. We reel in our lines and watch Jack land his fish. It is long and thin, and its speckled belly gleams silver as it thrashes in the tiny beam of the flashlight. Jack looks at us helplessly, delighted by his luck and skill, and yet wishing simultaneously that it had been me who caught the fish. Wishing even harder, I can see, that it had been Mike. We fish a little longer, but now there's no need to stay. The spell has been broken. The first steelhead has been caught in its journey up the Platte. "Let's wade downriver a little," Jack says when we reeled in our lines, to try to avoid the mud. I take short, rapid breaths as we move through the water. "This part is deep," Jack says. "Take it slow." The water creeps up my chest and into my armpits. I'm walking, weightless, through a dark and watery dream. For a moment, there is nothing but my forward momentum and the lift of water under the soles of my boots that keep me from going under. Then I feel the bank rise, suddenly beneath my feet. "No problem," I say, just before my foot slips and I do go under, head and all, into the icy current. I thrash my arms toward shore, and Jack grabs me. "Better get you home," he says, as the cold I've ignored for hours moves through my body. "You've got to meet students in a couple hours." Back at the truck, Doug is curled under a blanket like a dog. The next day, Jack sleeps, while Mike makes sure I meet my classes. The students are bright, skeptical, interested. My head buzzes with the heat of the all-nighter, a darkness like the river dark, threatening to close in. Mike and I drink bad machine coffee in one of the tunnels that connects the English department to the other school buildings. Tunnels to keep the students from getting lost in the storms that bring the blowing snow. "It's hard to explain how much I love these guys," Mike says, suddenly, as if I've asked him. "I don't know what I'd do without what we have." The cement walls of this poor excuse for a lounge move in on us like the weather. And this poet, who more resembles a wrestler, looks for a moment as if he might cry. It is late in the evening. I've met 3 classes, talked to at least 30 students, given another reading, signed books in Traverse City, and as part of an orgy of a potluck, cooked elk steaks, rare on the grill. Mike, in his other favorite role of DJ, plays one moody song after another on the stereo. We are all a little high from the good food and tequila. Mike's 10-year-old daughter, Jamie, and Jack dance cheek to cheek in their socks on the living room floor. So are we gonna do it? Jack asks when the song ends, a sparkle in his eyes that says the river is always in him, whether he's standing in it or not. This fish and fiction marathon is in its 38th hour, and I am beyond tired now, to some new level of consciousness. I've spent too much of my life proving I can be one of the guys, never saying uncle, never admitting I'm tired or hurting or cold. Tonight I am all 3. But the thing that makes me nod my head and say, yes, I want to go back again and stand in that icy river has nothing for a change to do with my father or my childhood or all the things in the world that I need to prove. It is the potent and honest feeling between these men that I covet, that I can't miss an opportunity to be close to. I have stumbled somehow onto this rare pack of animals who know I am there and have decided anyway to let me watch them at their dance. I want to memorize their movements. I want to take these river nights home with me for the times when the darkness is heavier than it is in this Michigan sky. A flurry of rubber and neoprene, and we're back inside the Montero. Greg Brown is singing the song about the laughing river. This is your night, Delp, Jack says. I can feel it. Around the next bend will be honors, scattered lights.
A contribution to statistics by Wisława Szymborska. Out of 100 people, those who always know better, 52. Doubting every step, nearly all the rest. Glad to lend a hand if it doesn't take too long. As high as 49. Always good because they can't be otherwise. 4. Well, maybe 5. Able to admire without envy. 18. Suffering illusions induced by fleeting youth. 60. Give or take a few. Not to be taken lightly. 44. Living in constant fear of something or someone. 77. Capable of happiness. 20-something tops. Harmless singly, savage in crowds. Half at least. Cruel when forced by circumstance. Better not to know, even ballpark figures. Wise after the fact. Just a couple more than wise before it. Taking only things from life. 30. I wish I were wrong. Hunched in pain, No flashlight in the dark. 83, sooner or later. Righteous, 35, which is a lot. Righteous and understanding, 3. Worthy of compassion, 99. Mortal, 100 out of 100. Thus far, this figure remains unchanged.
If I came back as a blade of grass, I wonder, would I wonder? All I know is I'd be thankful for every drop of water. I was foolish, I was young, I was thinking that I'd become something bigger than this galaxy. Now I'm older and I've grown into someone who has known the beauty of a life and gravity. Every day I think a little more of the time that I have left, and I wonder why not play a little longer. Every day I think a little more of the time that I have spent, and I wonder why not play a little longer. And I've been blessed with all these dreams of the people that I need watching out for me now and then. When I get to say the things that I wish I could have said before they laid their souls down to rest. Every day I think a little more of the time that I have spent, and I wonder why play a little longer. Every day I think a little more of the time that I've got left, and I wonder why not play a little longer. Play a little longer. All the stories, times of old, make me wonder if my soul remembers what my body doesn't know. Did a sailor cross the sea? Maybe there's a part of me who knows a lifetime ago. Every day I think a little more of the time that I have spent, and I wonder why Play a little longer. Would you play a little longer?